Awesome, and everyone can hear me. All right, so it'll be kind of informal. This is actually kind of nice. I like more intimate discussions. Feel free to raise your hand. I'll try and keep an eye on the side windows here if you have any questions. Basically, what Lisa asked me to do in speaking with you today is to just talk to you a bit about what we do at MiCCA My Health, what the organization does, and then kind of also do an overview of some of the legislation that we're advocating for at the state level. We do some federal work too, and I put a couple plugs about that work, but mostly what we work on is state level advocacy to improve air quality. So let's see. It's not letting me advance. There we go. Okay, so MiCCA My Health. So first of all, I'm Kindra Weid. I'm the coalition coordinator with MiCCA My Health. I'm also a registered nurse. And I do work still at the bedside. I work in a medical intensive care unit. I do 2 12s a week, and then I do this work on the side, and it's actually been a great mix. I missed bedside when I did 100% public health. And so I found a good balance between the two work with this job. So first, let me tell you about MiCCA My Health. It's an organization that started in 2012. I didn't join until 2015. Essentially, what happened was there was a lot of information about high asthma rates in Michigan, and it was correlating to areas with poor air quality. And so a lot of organizations got together and wanted to determine the sources of the poor air quality, why we had poor air quality, and why it was impacting public health. And initially when I joined this work in 2015. I was their health fellow. I was essentially, the organization was started by non-health people. It was public health group, but they wanted a health voice. And so I started doing 10 hours a week, just talking to legislators, letting them know what's happening at the bedside in relationship to poor air quality in Michigan. So stories, as you know, are very impactful, more so than data. It's nice to have both. It's nice to have the data and the personal stories, but the personal stories are what legislators remember the most. And mostly in my meetings with key legislators and decision makers, we take a health and all policies approach. And our goal is to make those connections clear to legislators and key decision makers about poor air quality, the connections between poor air quality and health outcomes, and how that by improving air quality, we can therefore improve public health. So we connect health professionals such as yourselves, mostly nurses, to opportunities to advocate and educate for policies that improve outdoor air quality and then reduce the negative health impacts associated with air pollution across the state. So in order to understand what policies we work at, it's nice because I'm talking to a group that already has an understanding of the pathophysiology, already has an understanding of climate, and already has an understanding of social determinants of health. So I don't have to build those blocks for you guys, but if you have questions, let me know. But because we look at the sources of air pollution, those are the policies that we end up advocating for. So breaking it down by sector, this is probably all review for you, just to learn what our major contributors to air pollution are: transportation, electricity or energy production, and then also industries and buildings. So those are the 3 key areas where we do our advocacy and education, and where we also do a lot of advocating for legislation at the state level and at the federal level as well. And again, I don't need to reiterate to you as well that air pollution is harmful on 2 fronts, not only as direct air pollution that we breathe in, but also as it contributes to climate change and those human health impacts from that as well. So moving on, we will start with transportation related air pollution. So first and foremost, our number 1 source is TRAP, we call, just to abbreviate it. And it's our number 1 source of greenhouse gas emissions and air pollution. And interestingly, since starting this work, so I started in 2015, Our number one source was energy production at that time. And a lot of the advocacy work that we did was around energy production and trying to get a cleaner, more renewable grid. And I've seen a shift in our work as our number one source has shifted to transportation emissions, and probably, it's been a bit of a victory, but and certainly not solely our work, but it's been nice to see this shift. And so now we're working on transportation emissions more aggressively, and that's been since probably in the last 2 to 3 years. And so I'll just go through the main sources, and then I'll tell you what legislation we have that, or what things are happening at the state level regarding these different areas. So since we've seen a shuttering of coal, we now have transportation emissions as our number one spot. Energy production is number two. It's our second source of air pollution, but like I mentioned, we're making some progress on this front, and I have some information specific about some advocacy that's happening in the state around our utilities and energy production. This is just to give you a lay of the land from 2019, and I actually think this is different now if we were to take a snapshot of it today in 2021, but this is the most recent information we have from the EIA. Essentially, we get you can see the bulk of our energy is generated by the combustion of fossil fuels. We do have some from clean renewable energy, such as wind, solar, hydro, thermal sources, but to a lesser extent. And to just kind of give you a little history, we overhauled our state energy plan back in 2016. And that was called the Public Act 342. It was signed into law. And this is known as the Clean and Renewable Energy and Energy Waste Reduction Act. And it amended our 2008 energy law. Okay. And so what that did at that time was it set a couple things into place that we're now starting to amend. What it set into place was that we had to obtain 15% of our energy, called our Energy Renewable Portfolio Standard. Renewable Portfolio Standard, or RPS, needed to come from clean energy. In 2008, the 2008 law set it at 10%, and then the 2016 law set it at 15%, and we had to achieve that by 2021. So that law, or that goal, sunsets at the end of this year. We have met that goal. But there hasn't been any legislation to advance that goal moving forward. So that's another piece that we're watching. There's a couple other things that were set in that 2016 legislation that I'll talk about in a minute. And then the only other thing that's happening, well, it's a big deal. The other thing that's happening with climate is Governor Whitmer had her executive directive, her executive order on climate, with the goal of carbon neutrality economy-wide by 2050. And, this is different than a renewable portfolio standard. We understand that there's differences between carbon neutrality and 100% renewable, but we continue to push and advance renewable energy, clean energy as much as possible. So just to kind of give you a lay of the land of where we're at right now. Also, industries and buildings are a large contributor to air pollution. They have large heating and cooling systems, as well as emissions from their production processes. And we hear a lot of, we do a lot of work with emissions around paper mills across the state. The areas around paper mills tend to have a lot of poor air quality as well, also with the oil refineries, et cetera. So as you can probably imagine, some of our larger hospital systems are also major sources of industrial pollution. And some of them do have initiatives to increase their, or improve their waste reduction, and also improve their impact on the climate, their energy use, et cetera. Homes and businesses, and this is new work for us, represent an estimated 40% of global energy greenhouse gas emissions. And just this past year, there's been a huge push to focus and shift our efforts towards building decarbonization, as Lisa kind of touched on a little bit earlier. And we're in the midst of formulating a health group at the state level. There's some interest between MiCCA and the Michigan Environmental Council to get a health group formulated. So I encourage any of you who might be interested in that, and you'll hear more about that through our separate organizations. But we are pushing to do some more building decarbonization work. So I really like this slide because it just kind of really concisely categorizes the different work we do. So we do a lot of work on transportation, a lot of work on energy production, we're doing a lot of work on buildings. We do not and have not touched on agriculture, and I think that's going to be probably part of our most challenging work. But there is work that's going on regarding emissions from the agricultural segment or sector. And but that's not a big piece of what legislation's happening at the state level right now. So a quick lay of the land at the state level, we have, I just wanted to let you know how things look politically. For those of you who aren't aware, the Senate and the House have a Republican majority. These are your leaders, Speaker of the House and Majority Leader. You may recognize these people. I also put links on the Senate and House so that people who aren't aware who their representatives are or who their senators are, they can look that up there. Okay, so I wanted to talk about what's happening with energy production at the state level. This is probably our most urgent initiative. We don't have a legislative action right now, but we have a advocacy call, climate action. We're doing public comments on the integrated resource plan for consumers' energy. So let me back up a few steps and let you guys know what an integrated resource plan. I could probably spend an entire day talking about what integrated resource plans are, but I'm going to try and give you the really short, quick and dirty version. But essentially back in 2016, when we did the new energy laws, we created a mandate for all utilities to submit an integrated resource plan every 5 years. DTE has already conducted theirs. You may have heard press around that. Consumers Energy is in the process of doing theirs now. It was released in July to the public, and we're in this open period where we're accepting public comment on their integrated resource plan. So what is an IRP? So an IRP outlines a utility's vision of how to provide energy to their customers. It requires the utility to predict customer power needs over the next 15 to 20 years. So even though they're submitted every 5 years, obviously energy production is something that we can't predict on that short term of a basis. And we need to make projections into the future much further forecasted ahead. And so they need to submit to a governing body, which is the Michigan Public Service Commission. And I'll tell you a little bit about them. They need to let them know what their plans are for the next 5 years. And they do this mandate back in 2016 required them to do this. So in these cases, the utilities let us know how much energy efficiency they're going to be using, how much wind, how much solar, how much gas they need, and demand response that they plan to invest in so that they can meet the needs of their customers. The plans don't delve really deeply into what projects they're going to be doing, but they rather set a pathway as to where they're going to be spending buckets of money and buckets of resources. And they need to meet certain criteria set forth by that law back in 2016. They need to safely and reliably meet customer need. And they must also be resilient to possible future risks. So fluctuating gas prices would be a future risk that they need to calculate. So recognizing that things change over time, their plans were designed by law to be repeated every 5 years. And that way they can course correct if things have changed. So essentially, it's just a long-term plan that provides the most reasonable and prudent means for meeting the energy and capacity resources of its customers. Consumers Energy is currently in this process. I mentioned that DTE already submitted theirs. And so what they've done, again, is they've released it. And now we have this open comment period that's open right now where we can go ahead and comment on what they've proposed. And so one of the big things and one of the major goals of, Lisa, go ahead. This is a good.
Well, no, I'm going to let you finish your statement. And then I want you to finish this. And then I want to ask a question before you go. I want to ask you a question about the IRP, but you may answer it as you finish.
Okay. So what I've done is I put a link here, let's see, to what an IRP is. I put tons of links on this slide so that you guys, because it's a really complicated issue. But basically what you can do is, let me get back to my slides. You can go through and click and link on what the IRP details and what our big asks are. And I don't think the Michigan Public Service is the information about them is that important to the integrated resource plans. However, our biggest ask since I've been doing this work is to get a health impact assessment into utility planning processes. They do not and are not required by state to take into account the impacts that happen on public health. And there is gobs and gobs and gobs of scientific research that shows that energy production has the emissions from energy production has a large impact on air quality and particulate matter, and also contributes to climate change. And we know that both of those things have impacts on human health. And those externalities are not taken into account when they're making their decisions about energy use, capacity, and expanding clean and renewable energy as much as possible. So that being said, that's our major ask. That's one of our biggest things. It's not mandated by law. The Michigan Public Service Commission upholds the law that was set in 2016. And in that law, it does not require them to take health into effect. We have made the case in the DTE IRP. I provided expert testimony in that case, making the case that air pollution contributes to poor health outcomes and that these externalities needed to be taken into consideration as they develop their plans. And it was a much easier case than the DTE one because they have a lot more coal at that time and it has a lot more negative health impacts. And what happens is the testimony gets reviewed by an administrative law judge, and she makes recommendations to the Michigan Public Service Commission, who then makes the final ruling. She mentioned that she recognized that health benefits are critical and important, but not required by state mandate to be considered. So we will make this case again, and we will ask for this again in the consumer's IRP. But essentially the Michigan Public Service Commission has said, yes, we agree this is important information, but until it's regulated or mandated, we can't do anything. Our hands are tied. So we continue to push for that at the state level. And so one way that you can advocate around this is through the My Clean Consumers Energy Act. I'm not going to click on this because it'll take me off this page, but I've linked the Sierra Club and the NRDC's action page here for you to submit public comments. And then below that, we have a community campaign called My Future, My Power, which focuses on energy democracy and the health impacts more so than the NRDC and Sierra Club letter. So you can submit comments from both action portals. And the campaign that I'm a part of is called My Future, My Power. And if you have questions about those, I can fill you in or let you know when we're having events about that. Go ahead, Julie. Sorry.
Are there other states, very many other states who do have health impact assessments as part of their IRPs?
So what there, I believe that there are, I've seen IRPs that utilities have included an HIA in. It is not required by law. I believe possibly California is one of the states that it's required. I've seen some utility plans in there, like 5-year plans have an HIA. Shockingly, Kentucky
Wow.
had one of their major utilities had a health impact assessment, and that's been something that we've used as a model in our advocacy work. Really quick highlights. How are we doing for time?
Kindra,
Yeah.
can I follow up on Julie's question?
Yeah.
With the IRP, because I think this IRP is really important, and boy, the health impact assessment is critically important. And somehow, I don't know about you, Julie, that went like this. When we talked to our friend from the NRDC, we didn't catch the importance of a health impact assessment. And so I guess Julie did put together a testimony and kind of focus on health impacts of fossil fuels. And then there was that press release earlier this year in terms of the consumer IRP before they put out their first version. I guess I'm not following. What I'm trying to figure out is, should we be putting statements in each of these different websites? And can we put essentially the same statement in each one? And it sounds like one thing we did not do is really push for the health impact assessment, which we should be doing. I mean, we should be doing that because that makes sense. So should we do it for each of these, and should we include some information about or the request for the HIA?
So a couple things. I think they're able to, as far as putting in comments from multiple sites, it's public comment. It doesn't matter that it's under two different avenues, and they have slightly different messaging for the two. And you can click on the links for each of them, and you can just kind of see which one you feel more comfortable with if you only want to do one. So I don't think that it's a problem to submit comments to both. The other piece is that we will be doing a rollout of the My Future, My Power. I'll be doing some direct messaging to health professionals. You can feel to engage then. I probably will modify the letter a little bit to focus. They do a lot of energy democracy language in their letter, which is critically important as well, but I'll add more health messaging to it, or more health talking points for people to insert into their letter. Is that?
I think so. So I think you're saying that if we go to each of these sites, it's fine for us to write a similar letter in all three of those sites. Yes.
Yeah, I think that's fine.
Okay.
And go ahead.
And we should request I wonder if what I'm thinking is for the group, if maybe, I come up with something, or if somebody wants to help me and we run it by you, Kindra, just some talking points, and then we could get it out to our group to send things in as public, as public statements to these different organizations, so that would more individual, is it better for us to do it as one organization, MiCCA, or is it better for us to be individuals all kind of writing similar talking points?
So there's talking points set in the action portals, and the letter's pre-drafted for you.
Oh,
so
okay.
you can add pieces to it that you want. You could you can do it a couple different ways. You could send out like a call to action, provide them with the portals, and say, here's some additional talking points you could insert, which is kind of my plan. You could do it that way. I think basically right now, the way that we've been advocating, or the talk that we've had in our meetings, is that the more numbers, the better. So I plan to try and get individual people to sign the letter. We have a goal of 250 comments for the My Future, My Power campaign. The My Clean Consumers Energy, they have such larger advocacy audiences. They link into their Sierra Club members and their NRDC members. And I think last count I had heard, they had submitted over 800 comments.
Wow.
So I think we're trying to but the consumers, or the DTE IRP, got 3,000 public comments.
Okay.
So we're really trying, I think we're trying to get numbers at this point.
So Kindra, would this be too much of would you care? I will tell you that my philosophy in advocacy is nobody steals anything from me, because I like to get the information out. So if you have that information, do you care if we just take your information and share it with our membership?
Yeah, no, that's absolutely fine. And the links are, the action portals are already open and active, and they're on here, and I'll send them to you. I just haven't done a push out to our membership, our coalition membership. We're kind of December, January. The deadline for comments is in at the end of January.
And does that include the HIA part of it?
Yeah,
And
that's
potential talking points.
Yep.
Okay,
No, the HIA comment or the HIA talking points haven't been created. Specific additions. We'd have to do like a separate talking point, and I have them created, but they haven't been distributed. And so I can share those with you, and you can share those. I don't feel I don't have the common, I don't have ownership of that. That messaging will be shared.
That's really helpful. Thank you so much. Really appreciate that.
Yeah, of course. And I appreciate you sharing it, because this is important. And so anybody who's in consumers territory, I definitely, and this is your neck of the woods. So this is really good for your membership. I know we have a couple of callers that are down here, and it's much more mixed down here. There'll be some DTE customers in Ann Arbor. There's also consumers energy customers in Ann Arbor, and down in this part of the state, the lines are a lot blurrier. The other big component is that another big messaging point is that they're continuing to rely on natural gas well into 2040. And to shut down the J.H. Campbell plant, which is in West Olive, which is the coal plant, which is a lot of public pressure to do, they are claiming that they need to meet those capacity needs and demand needs by purchasing 4 new natural gas plants. They're not creating new natural gas plants, but they're purchasing 4 new ones. And I have the locations of them. They're listed in one of the links for the integrated resource plan. I have it actually, it's linked to Consumers Energy. There's a press release, and they're touting, and rightfully so, their early retirement of J.H. Campbell. But then a couple lines down, they say, oh, but by the way, we need to still be reliable for you guys, and we still need to be able to meet your energy needs. So we're going to purchase these 4 gas plants from our parent company, and we're going to run those to meet those needs. So what Sierra Club and RDC have done some modeling, and they feel that if they maximize energy waste reduction, energy efficiency, and their renewable portfolio, if they can maximize that, they do not need to purchase the Kalamazoo plant or the Dearborn plant, which are already in environmentally injustice communities. They do not need to purchase those plants, and that they can meet those needs without further investing in fossil fuels, and given the climate crisis. So that's more messaging that is part of the scripted letters on the action portal, so that you'll find that language in there. Okay, so sorry, let me just close her up.
This is really, really hugely helpful information. I hope you guys are finding it that way too. And don't worry about your dog, Joanne. We have them. We all, I don't know if everybody has a dog here, but
it's me.
I meant Kindra. Yeah, no worries.
It's Pearl. Okay, so
Kindra, can I just
yeah.
So ideally, these letters and public comment accomplish a mandate. And who institutes a mandate? I mean, that's what you were trying for before, right?
So ideally, what we're trying to do right now is do more of what we did with the DTE IRP. We don't have the power. A mandate needs to either be an executive order or a law that's going to make a health impact assessment part of this process. Okay. So what we're trying to do still is to create public pressure. The fact that the administrative law judge in the DTE IRP case even mentioned health impacts was an advance in this messaging. And the MPSC took note of that.
That's great.
And so we're just trying to continue that messaging, continue the narrative that these externalities need to be taken into account. And especially given the climate crisis, the stakes are very high.
Yeah.
And I think our best hope, I don't know how feasible it is, but I think our best hope is going to be an executive order to this effect.
Okay, thank you.
Do we have any organization? Are we organizing anything to put pressure on the governor in particular to require HIAs and IRPs?
We have, there's not been a formal coordinated effort. There's been the fact that she has a council on climate solutions.
Right.
And within that energy, there's work groups. And within that energy work group, we have discussed this. The people who are on the council also know that this is missing. And it's been a recommendation. So, but we could certainly put a group of health groups together and request a meeting with her office and push it again.
I love that idea.
Yeah, I do too. So like I said, this could be an entire day, and this has been the bulk of my work since 2015. So, but the other piece that is currently legislation, which is actually like an actionable item that people can actually advocate and call their legislators about, is these bills that are made to amend the Public Act from back in 2016. So back in 2016, there's the law mandated that there was no participation in community solar. And it also placed a cap on distributed generation, which is essentially rooftop solar, at 1%. So for those of you that aren't familiar with what community solar is, it's essentially an array that's located within a community where multiple customers can buy in. The reason that this was written into law as not something that Michigan can participate in, and why there was a cap put in how much generation can be, how much energy can be generated outside of the grid. We believe that this was from lobbying from the utilities at that time. So because it's competitive, it was thought of as competition to them. So essentially, residents and small businesses can sign on to these and contribute to these community arrays. And it's a way for people who can't participate by putting solar on their roof, but they can buy into energy and receive energy from a certain number of panels within the community array. So it basically makes community solar more accessible, and it expands the amount of solar that we can get to rural parts of Michigan. A lot of solar doesn't reach, it's only at a utility scale. And this is a good way to get smaller arrays of solar to more dispersed parts of the state, if that makes sense. So there's specifically House Bill 4715 and 4716, which basically allows for community solar.
Do you know, Kendra, that if the greater extent to which individuals have solar panels, and maybe it requires an improvement in the electric grid, but does that help with the intermittency issue?
Yes.
Okay.
That's one of the arguments, is that it improves the reliability of the grid and the resiliency of the grid.
Yeah, and I saw something come out of Yale Climate Communications just the other day about overbuilding on solar can actually decrease our dependent, make the grid more reliable.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So that's, so we're part of the Michigan Community Solar Alliance. My Health is, and I've linked their page to their logo so you can find their messaging. They have talking points. They have a pre-scripted letter to take action on these bills. Essentially, the things that they promote and benefit is that it saves individuals and businesses money. It's clean, renewable energy. We're supportive because it's cleaner energy. It expands customer choice. It generates income and security for farmers, creates jobs, boosts the economy without raising taxes, and strengthens Michigan's energy grid. So that's their key talking points. I always add in a sentence at the end to my letters about, oh, and by the way, this also improves public health by improving air quality. And it also mitigates the impacts of climate change, etc. So I always kind of add those kind of pieces to my letters. I always bring health messaging into the fold.
Nan, I think Nan had a question. Nan?
Oh, sorry.
You're muted.
Sorry, just a quick question. Do you know if local communities can overrule this cap? No?
No. And the DG cap is probably the most contested. This is a state mandate, and it was set into law back in 2016 to set it at 1%. So rooftop solar can only be generated at 1%, and they UPCO and consumers were kind enough to raise theirs to 2%. And half can be on residential and half can be on larger solar arrays. So basically our own government has limited the amount of solar that we can produce.
Okay.
And so, no, we can't, whatever goes into the grid has to be capped at 1% right now. And we met that cap already. And that's when consumers went ahead and raised it to 2% for their customers. DTE did not. So this is a big problem and important to people in the UP, where distributed generation is very popular. So this actually has bipartisan support, and Representative Markkinen, who is the rep in the Hancock area, he introduced 4236, and that removes the cap on how much solar can be connected to the grid. There are talks and lobbying from the utilities where they want to raise the cap. We want to lift the cap. The cap should be off. We may have to make an interim compromise to raise it to 5%. And then hopefully down the road, the appetite for solar and the appetite will be, and the public pressure will be such that we can actually then lift it at that point. We'll just have to see things and landscapes change.
Can I ask you that? So the 4236, is that written to, is that say not over 1%, or is that the thing that Markkinen introduced that says raise or lift the cap?
Yes, it's Markkinen's bill, and it's to lift it totally.
He says, okay, good.
Yep. And that's had a hearing at the Energy and Technology Committee. The Energy and Technology Committee is heavily lobbied by the utilities, and the pushback is that because I listened to the hearing, the consumers representatives and the DTE representatives spoke at the hearing, and they are concerned that they will, if they lift that cap, they will not receive the funds that they need to maintain the grid that people are using as well. So they don't want it lifted totally. They want to be able to, in some way, charge these customers for utilizing the grid, even though they're creating their own energy and utilizing the grid, their grid, in some way. And so trying to figure out a balance of how to have people pay for the energy that they contribute to the grid, but that they're generating on their own, but maybe like paying a fee for using the grid. They're trying to understand how they can reconcile that. And so I don't know that this bill will get passed in its current language, but there might be an amendment or a reiteration of this bill. So we'll just it's something that we're watching, and it's actually getting a lot of movement and a lot of talk right now. And I think, not sure, there was a I know I linked here, I hyperlinked to the actual verbiage of each bill. So you can read it, but sometimes that's a little bit wonky and not that helpful. And sometimes it's easier to read posts about, criticisms and such. Julie?
Do you think that as storage batteries become more cheaper and more accessible, that will induce the energy companies to increase the limit a little bit or a lot? I mean, that's going to be, I don't know how widely that would be used. I mean, at this point, the storage batteries are pretty expensive, but is that something that comes into the
Well, that's
conversation?
kind of part of the argument, is that if we lift the cap, then that will, it will decrease the cost of these technologies because they'll be flooded with dollars. Right now, it's kind of limited, and so that's kind of the argument. Yeah, I definitely think that makes sense.
Okay.
But they're so worried about not getting their profits that they're, unfortunately squashing progress.
Innovation. Yeah.
So
Crazy.
Yeah, it is super frustrating. So there's more information about these here. I will go to the next. How are we doing for time? We'll try to. So transportation. There is, within that climate and council solution, there's a work group called the Transportation and Mobility Work Group. We were part of a sub-work group of that group that made recommendations to the Transportation and Mobility Council Work Group. So I pushed public health at every avenue during that. I'm part of the Michigan Clean Truck campaign, and that's where we do a lot. That's where we know that a lot of our diesel emissions have the most harmful impact on human health. And so we have an initiative on the side to work on pushing medium and heavy duty trucks and fleets towards electrification, highlighting the public health impacts of that. And then we also are doing an electric school bus transition work group, which is kind of like really exciting and fun work, because if anybody deserves a clean ride to school, it's kids. And it is just a teeny tiny little piece of the puzzle, but our buses are extremely old and extremely dirty. And electric school buses seem to be something that is a bipartisan issue, and people seem to be getting behind it. There's a lot of federal dollars that just came through with the infrastructure bill that can be are going to trickle down through the state level to advance electrification of school buses. It's peanuts compared to how much we actually need, but we can start pushing the rollout in the hardest hit communities and are really pushing those dollars to be spent with an equity focus. So if anybody's interested in electric school buses or idle reduction campaigns, give me a call, because those groups are just starting here in Michigan. There's been people who work in the transportation sector who's been working on idle reduction for quite a while, but we haven't combined the two together. So this is going to be a new health group. And then there was also a call. We don't have any legislation around EVs right now. The climate isn't particularly amenable to it in Lansing right now, because we don't have a majority in the House or the Senate. But we do have this big push from the My Clean Future Coalition, where they've, I have the details of it here, where they want to do 600 million in investments. They called for 600 million investments for Michigan alone, on site development for EV facilities, recruitment for mobility jobs, clean school and transit buses, clean municipal and state fleet vehicles, alternative fueling stations and EV chargers, and upgrades for low income and multifamily housing with EV chargers. So the big kick that we're really trying to push is to make sure that this push to electrification of our vehicles is equity based, and it's not just something that only the people that can afford it, because really the communities that need it the most are probably the people that can't afford it. And so trying to keep that in mind and keep the dollars going towards the hardest hit areas. There are bills within that package. They haven't been released. They don't have sponsors yet. And so they're pushing for a big push. This was just released, this My Clean Future Coalition plan. The call for the spending was just released on November 1st. So this is a rather new initiative. And then I'll just try to talk quickly here, the building decarbonization work that is happening in Michigan. We're starting a group, like I talked about earlier, a Michigan-based health group that's in the early stages. So if anybody's interested in joining that, this is all really new and fascinating. And I put some links to some of the fact sheets at the Midwest Building Decarbonization Coalition that is just, it's mind-blowing how natural gas stoves contribute to poor air quality in the home, and also lots of studies around asthma incidents in homes that have natural gas stoves and appliances. And if you think about, someone just said it's a tailpipe in your kitchen, and I just was like, oh, you're right. So the Buildings and Housing Work Group under the the Council on Climate Solutions, they're doing a lot of stuff with building codes. They're trying to make sure that new construction has all electrification, that they're trying to make modify the building code so that new homes have a specific amount of voltage so that they can accommodate an all-electric house, and also chargers for vehicles. And then also, interestingly, there was a House bill that was announced that was a ban on all bans of natural gas. And so we have to kind of watch that sort of legislation and be on the offense to try and stop that sort of state level legislation happening, so that municipalities can make decisions on their own if they want to be have a decarbonize their buildings. So that being said, again, just this last week, there was a press release that came out about the climate resiliency plan. I linked it here, and there's also a bunch of bills, and I haven't had time to research them all, but there's a list of bills that all have to do with weatherization, disaster relief, all things that are related to climate. And so it's linked here. The press release I linked so that and it tells you all the different bills that have and who's been sponsoring them, so that you guys, if you feel passionate about one, but I've linked it all there. So I tried to give you as much resources. I knew we wouldn't have enough time to talk about everything we wanted to touch on, but I wanted you to be able to have links if you found something that was specifically interesting to you. And then I just piled everything on one page for you so that you had one resource. So the solar bills, the distributed generation bills, the IRP information, the Clean Commute for Kids Act is a federal legislation that once the Build Back Better America dollars are allocated towards electric school buses, we'll know how much more money we need. And the Clean Commute for
that
Kids
passed
Act,
in the House this morning?
Yes. Okay. Yes. I figured it, I knew late last night or this morning was going to be. So we'll be able to look specifically at what more dollars we want allocated. So we do a lot of state level stuff, but it's important to get the federal dollars to the state. And then there's also one last thing. There's an EPA methane rule that I wanted to put this on here. The deadline to register to speak at that is the 22nd. The registration link is on there. And so I'll get these slides right to Lisa right after we talk so that you guys have them. It's 3 to 5 minutes. They give you talking points. American Lung also has talking points, and you can just talk as a health professional and say how important it is. They're actually rolling back the rollback on the methane rule. So we can talk and say, yes, this is important and this is necessary. So
we're also really hoping that there's a fee on methane leakage as part of the Build Back Better Act. So we'll see. Manchin's opposed to it, of course. So it may not happen, but that would be great if it did. Wow, Kindra, you are just a rock star. No, God, I feel like I know what I'm going to do over Thanksgiving. I got to sit down with this PowerPoint and go through stuff and try to understand it. I can't believe you keep all this in your head. I am just so humbled and so appreciative of having it together in this organized fashion.
Well, and this is not everything. There's so much stuff I didn't get in here that I was worried about. Like there's stuff about cumulative health impacts. There's important legislation out there that's just been introduced and just sits because we don't have the right political climate to move it along. So,
and then that all gets into the voting stuff,
right.
Which, one of the big push us for MiCCA that we're considering. I mean, I don't know if we've decided as a group to do this, but it's coming from at least the consortium, is that voting rights are health. You know, we are voting for health when we're voting for our legislators, and to frame that message very, very clearly so we can get more and more people out and encourage the right to vote. And there's correlations specifically with, like, if you look at the asthma rate or the I think it's, I'd have to go back to the talk, but like it might even be mortality and access to the vote. I mean, like they correlate. And it's just really amazing. So inner city like Detroit that has a harder time getting people out to vote or have the ability to get out to vote also correlates with, you know, red line communities and the air pollution and all the rest. So blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Great work. I don't know about you guys, really, really found that helpful. That was just so good. And Nell said, excellent presentation. We're at 1 o'clock.
Thanks.
So I don't want to take a lot more time. Just want to say, Julie also wrote an email to get a stipend for MiCCA to work with Kindra, and we were able to get that for the building decarbonization. So a big thank you to Julie. And let's celebrate the fact that the Build Back Better Act got through the House. That's wonderful news. It now goes to the Senate. We don't know how long it'll be in the Senate. We think whatever the Senate version is will be the final version because the margin of passage is so narrow. So if they can get all 50 of their senators agreeing on whatever and getting it through, then the House seems to know that they have to defer to that. Because
right. Yeah.
Okay.
And have your legislators on speed dial. It's just it's just important.
It is, and I usually put in almost every email, but I have links where you can write Biden, you can call your House reps, and you can call your senators, and especially the Democratic House reps. Those are the ones we want to thank them for. Every one of the ones in Michigan voted for the Build Back Better. We want to thank them for doing that and to encourage them to vote for it again when it comes back from the Senate. We need to get this through. We need to finalize it. So
good. Thanks for that
exciting
advocacy.
times. Well, thanks for this. It was great. I'm going to let you go because I'm sure you got a ton of stuff to do. Yeah, so I'll let you go.
Thanks so much, Kindra. That was great.
Thanks a lot.